I am 58 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that kindness was a currency that always paid dividends. My late husband, Robert, and I built our business on that principle. We treated our employees like family and our clients with unwavering respect. We raised our son, Mark, to believe the same thing. We taught him that a person's character was their most valuable asset. For 30 years, I watched him grow into a man who embodied those values. Then he met Chloe. Chloe was beautiful and charming, and she swept my son off his feet. I wanted to love her for his sake. I truly did. I hosted engagement parties, helped her plan the wedding, and welcomed her into our family with open arms. But from the very beginning, there was a part of me that remained unsettled. It was in the way her eyes would scan a room, not to connect with people, but to assess their value. It was in the casual, almost dismissive way she spoke about her own family, who were good, hard-working people without the means that we had. Most of all, it was in the way she looked at my son, with a mixture of affection and what I could only describe as appraisal. Robert had been gone for 5 years, and the loneliness was a constant, dull ache. Mark was my only child, the center of my world. Seeing him happy was the most important thing to me. So I pushed my doubts down. I told myself I was being a stereotypical, overprotective mother. I told myself that Chloe's ambition was just a modern woman's drive, something to be admired. I chose to see her flaws as quirks, her materialism as a simple appreciation for the finer things in life. I chose to be kind. Before they married, however, I insisted on one thing, a prenuptial agreement. It was not a reflection of my trust in my son, but a necessary measure to protect the legacy Robert and I had spent our lives building. Our company was not just a business. It was a testament to our partnership, and it was meant to provide for generations to come. Mark understood. He was uncomfortable, but he knew where I was coming from. Chloe, on the other hand, was deeply offended.
She cried.
She accused me of thinking she was a gold digger. She told Mark that I was trying to control their marriage before it even began. Mark came to me, his face etched with turmoil. "Mom, she's heartbroken. She thinks you hate her." I sat him down in the study, the one Robert had designed, surrounded by the scent of old books and cedar. "This isn't about hate, Mark. It's about protection. Your father and I worked too hard to leave things to chance. This document protects you, it protects her, and it protects the future of this family. It's standard practice for people in our position." "It feels so transactional," he said, his voice low. "Marriage is a partnership," I replied gently. "And every good partnership has clear terms. This is just one of them. If she truly loves you for you, then this piece of paper means nothing." In the end, she signed it, but something shifted after that day. The warmth in her greetings became brittle. Her smiles never quite reached her eyes. A wall went up, and I knew I was on the other side of it. Still, I continued to be kind. I gave them a generous down payment for their first home. I paid for lavish vacations. When their daughter, my beautiful granddaughter Lily, was born 6 months ago, I was overjoyed. I thought the baby would be the bridge that finally connected us, that would melt the frost between me and Chloe. To secure Lily's future, I activated the trust fund Robert and I had established years ago. It was called the Legacy Trust, and its purpose was explicit: to fund the education, health, and significant life milestones of our grandchildren. It contained a substantial amount of money, to be managed by a trustee until each grandchild reached the age of 25. I appointed Mark as the primary trustee for Lily's portion, believing it would be a good way for him to learn financial responsibility and to feel a direct connection to his daughter's future. I was a co-trustee, a fail-safe, but I wanted him to take the lead. It was a gesture of trust, a way of showing both him and Chloe that I saw them as capable partners in this family. That trust was my undoing. The line was crossed not with a dramatic explosion, but with the quiet arrival of a single, misaddressed envelope. It was a quarterly statement for the Legacy Trust. It should have gone to Mark's house, but a clerical error had sent it to mine. I almost forwarded it to him without a second thought, but a flicker of instinct, a cold premonition, made me pause. I slit the envelope open with my letter opener. My eyes scanned the familiar letterhead, the columns of numbers, the portfolio performance. Everything looked normal until I reached the section detailing withdrawals. There was one entry, dated 2 months prior. A single transaction for $30,000. My breath caught in my throat. The recipient was listed as the Pinnacle Aesthetics Clinic. The memo line simply read, "Medical procedure." I sat there, in the quiet of my study, the statement trembling in my hand.
$32,000.
Pinnacle Aesthetics. I knew that name. Chloe had mentioned it once, talking about a celebrity she admired. It was one of the most exclusive plastic surgery clinics in the country. A place you went for a mommy makeover, a place you went to erase the physical evidence of childbirth with a scalpel and a credit card. The money in that trust was Lily's. It was for her college tuition, for a down payment on her own home one day, for a safety net in a world that had none. It was her legacy, bought with her grandfather's sweat and love. And Chloe had taken it. She had taken her own daughter's future and spent it on her own vanity. The kindness I had so carefully cultivated within myself for years began to curdle into something cold and hard. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a betrayal of the highest order, and it would not stand. My first impulse was to call Mark and scream, to demand an explanation. But I stopped myself. The rage was a hot, blinding force, but beneath it, a cooler, more calculating thought took hold. They had done this quietly, hoping I would never find out. A direct confrontation would only lead to lies, denials, and manufactured tears from Chloe. Mark would rush to her defense, and I would be cast as the villain, the meddling mother-in-law who couldn't respect their privacy.
No.
I needed proof. I needed to understand the full scope of their deception before I made a single move. I folded the bank statement carefully and placed it in my personal safe, behind Robert's old watch and my wedding pearls. This was now evidence. My mind started working, methodically, stripping the emotion away and focusing on the facts. The withdrawal was 2 months ago. Chloe had seemed to recover from childbirth remarkably quickly. She had been posting photos of herself in new, expensive outfits, looking impossibly trim and toned for a new mother. At the time, I had chalked it up to youth and good genetics. Now I saw it for what it was, a $30,000 lie. The next morning, I decided my first step would be a conversation with Mark. A casual, non-accusatory one. I needed to see how he would react, how deep the deception went. I called him around mid-morning, when I knew he would be at his desk at the office. "Hi, Mom," he answered, his voice bright and cheerful. "Everything okay?" "Everything is fine, dear," I said, keeping my tone light. "I was just thinking about you and Chloe. How is she doing? It must be so exhausting with a new baby." "She's great, Mom. A little tired, but she's a natural. And Lily is just perfect." "I'm so glad to hear it," I said. Then, I carefully planted the seed. "I know she had that medical procedure a couple of months back. I hope her recovery was smooth. I felt so bad that I didn't know about it until after. I would have come to help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was only a second, but it felt like an hour. The cheerful energy in his voice vanished.
Oh, yeah, that.
It was fine. She recovered really quickly. The doctors were amazing. His hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. He was already on edge. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "That's wonderful," I said, my voice still betraying nothing. "It must have been serious if it wasn't covered by your insurance. I just want to make sure you two aren't struggling financially because of it." Another pause, this one longer. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, trying to construct the right lie. No, we're fine, Mom. Really. It was the necessary medical expense. We took care of it. Don't you worry about it." "Took care of it." I pressed, ever so gently. With money from the trust. The silence that followed was deafening. I had him. He was caught completely off guard. "Mom," he finally stammered, his voice tight with panic. "How did you?" "Look, it's complicated. Chloe needed it. It was for her health. We can talk about this later. Of course, dear, I said, my voice as smooth as glass. I'm just glad she's okay. Send her my love. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. It was worse than I thought. He wasn't just aware of it. He was an active participant in the lie. He was covering for her, using phrases like necessary medical expense, and for her health. They had rehearsed this. They had a story ready just in case. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. My son, the boy I had raised to be honest and honorable, was lying to my face to protect his wife's greed. That afternoon, I called my best friend, Linda. Linda and I had known each other since college. She was a retired lawyer, sharp as a tack, and the most pragmatic person I knew. She had been there when Robert died, holding my hand through the darkest days. She was the only person I could trust with this. I met her at our favorite little cafe, a quiet place where we could talk without being overheard. I laid out the whole story, from my initial suspicions about Chloe to the bank statement and the phone call with Mark. I slid a photocopy of the statement across the table to her. She put on her reading glasses and studied it for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes full of a familiar, no-nonsense fire. Well, the little witch certainly has some nerve, she said flatly. It's the lying, Linda, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It's that Mark isn't on it. They took money meant for their daughter, for Lily, and they lied about it. Of course they lied, she said, taking a sip of her tea. Thieves always do. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I want to confront them. I want to demand they put the money back. I trailed off, the anger making it hard to think clearly. Slow down, Linda said, holding up a hand. You go in there with guns blazing, and you'll get nowhere. Chloe will play the victim. Mark will get defensive. They'll twist this around and make you the bad guy. You have the initial proof, but you need more. You need to build an airtight case before you even think about confronting them. What kind of case? I asked. First, confirm the nature of the procedure. You suspect it's cosmetic. You need to prove it. Second, find out exactly how they access the money. Mark is the trustee, but a withdrawal that large should have required more than just his signature. There might be a paper trail of fraud there. Third, and most importantly, you need to find your leverage. Getting the money back is one thing. Ensuring this never happens again is another. Her calm, logical approach was like a balm on my frayed nerves. She was right. I had been letting my emotions drive me. I needed to think like the CEO I once was, not like a heartbroken mother. I needed a strategy. So, where do I start? I asked. Start with the clinic, she said, tapping the bank statement. The Pinnacle Aesthetics Clinic. See what you can find out. And then you need to look at the trust documents again. Every single word. There might be something in the fine print they overlooked. I left the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. The hurt was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a layer of cold, hard resolve. Linda was right. This was not just a family squabble. This was a calculated deception, and I was going to unravel it, piece by piece. My next step was to investigate the clinic. I went home, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. I typed the name into the search engine. The website that appeared was exactly what I expected. It was sleek, modern, and filled with images of flawless women lounging in luxurious settings. The homepage banner read, "The Pinnacle Aesthetics Clinic, where motherhood meets magnificence." I clicked on the Services tab. The drop-down menu was a laundry list of cosmetic procedures: breast augmentation, tummy tucks, liposuction, facial rejuvenation. And there it was, their signature package, the Mommy Makeover. I clicked on it. The description was sickeningly cheerful. It promised to restore your pre-pregnancy body and reclaim your confidence through a combination of procedures tailored to the individual. The page included before and after photos, testimonials from glowing clients, and a detailed breakdown of what the package included. There was no mention of necessary medical expenses or reconstructive surgery. This was elective, cosmetic, and expensive. I scrolled down to the pricing section. While they didn't list exact figures, they provided a range for the mommy makeover package. It started at $25,000 and could go up to $50,000, depending on the specifics. $30,000 fit squarely in the middle of that range. This was it. There was no doubt left in my mind. Now I needed to understand how they had justified the withdrawal. I called Mark again the next day. This time, I was more direct. "Mark," I began, my voice firm but calm. "We need to talk about the $30,000 withdrawal from Lily's trust." He sighed heavily. I could hear the exhaustion and guilt in it. "Mom, I told you we handled it. It was a medical thing for Chloe." "I need more than that, Mark," I said.
I'm atsotrusty.
"A withdrawal of that size requires proper documentation. What kind of medical procedure was it, exactly?" He was silent for a moment. It was reconstructive surgery," he said, his voice gaining a slight, unconvincing confidence. "She had some complications after the birth."
Tearing.
It was very serious. The doctor recommended it. The lie was so blatant, so easily disproven, that I almost laughed. I had been at the hospital when Lily was born. I had spoken to Chloe's doctors myself. The birth had been smooth, with no complications whatsoever. She was home in 2 days. "Reconstructive surgery?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "That's interesting, because your insurance is some of the best in the country. A necessary reconstructive surgery would have been covered, at least in part. But this was paid for in full, with cash from a trust fund." "There were reasons," he stammered. "Insurance complications. We needed to pay up front. It's all very boring and technical." "I see," I said coolly. "And which doctor recommended this procedure? Was it her obstetrician, Dr. Evans?" "No, it was a specialist," he said quickly. A little too quickly. "We were referred to him. His name is Dr. Peterson." He was digging himself into a deeper hole with every word. He was inventing names, inventing scenarios, weaving a tapestry of lies that was becoming more tangled by the second. I knew there was no Dr. Peterson. There were no complications. There was only Chloe's desire for a new body and my son's willingness to lie for her. "I'd like to see the documentation, Mark," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. The doctor's recommendation, the invoice from the clinic. As co-trustee, I need it for the trust's records. He sputtered. "Mom, that's an invasion of Chloe's privacy. It's her medical information. It's the trust's financial information." I corrected him. "And I have a legal right to it. Send it to me by the end of the day." I hung up before he could argue further. The confrontation left a bitter taste in my mouth. This was my son, the person I loved more than anyone else in the world, and I was having to treat him like a hostile witness. The Chloe I had suspected for years, the one I had tried to ignore, was no longer a phantom. She was real, and she had sunk her claws deep into my son's integrity. Later that afternoon, an email from Mark arrived in my inbox. The subject line was a single word: documentation. Attached was a scanned PDF. I opened it, my hands steady. It was a letter, on what looked like a doctor's letterhead. The name at the top was Dr. Alan Peterson. The letter was brief and vaguely worded. It stated that Chloe had been examined and was a candidate for a medically necessary procedure to correct postpartum abdominal and pectoral muscle damage. It was signed by the doctor. At first glance, it looked official, but I had spent 30 years in business. I had reviewed thousands of documents, contracts, and letters. I had a keen eye for things that were out of place. The letterhead looked a little too generic. The font was a standard one, nothing unique, and the signature looked hesitant. But the biggest red flag was the address at the top of the letter. It wasn't in our city, or even our state. It was for a small town in Oregon, a place I was certain Chloe had never been. My heart began to beat faster. This was not just a lie. This was something far more serious. I opened a new browser tab and typed Dr. Alan Peterson, Oregon, into the search bar. The results were immediate. There was indeed a Dr. Alan Peterson. He was a general practitioner, a family doctor, in a town of about 5,000 people. He was not a plastic surgeon. He was not a specialist in postpartum recovery. I found the phone number for his office and dialed it. A friendly receptionist answered. "Good afternoon, Dr. Peterson's office," she said. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm calling to verify some information. I have a letter here from the doctor regarding a patient referral, and I just need to confirm its authenticity for our records." "Of course," she said. "What's the patient's name?" "Chloe Sterling," I said, using her maiden name just in case. I heard the sound of typing. After a moment, the receptionist said, "I'm sorry, I don't have a Chloe Sterling in our system. Or a Chloe of any last name. Are you sure you have the right doctor?" "I'm quite sure," I said. "Could you spell the doctor's name for me?" She spelled it out. It matched the letter. "Ma'am, I can assure you, we have no record of that patient. Dr. Peterson has never treated anyone by that name." "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You've been very helpful." I hung up the phone and stared at the letter on my computer screen. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The letter was a forgery. They hadn't just lied. They had committed fraud. They had found a real doctor's name online, created a fake letterhead, and forged a medical recommendation to steal $30,000 from their own child's trust fund. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. This was a premeditated act. It required planning, coordination, and a level of moral depravity that I had never imagined my son was capable of. The anger I had felt before was now replaced by a chilling clarity. This was no longer a family dispute over money. This was a crime, and I was going to hold them accountable. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cool against my skin, and thought about Robert. I thought about the decades we had spent building our company, our family, our legacy. We had built it on a foundation of trust, honesty, and hard work. Chloe and Mark had taken a sledgehammer to that foundation. I knew I couldn't go to the police. As much as I wanted to see Chloe face legal consequences, I couldn't do that to Mark. I couldn't send my own son to jail. It would destroy him, and it would destroy Lily's life. But that didn't mean there were no consequences to be had. Legal action was not the only form of justice. My mind went back to the prenup. Linda had told me to read it again, every word. I went to my safe and retrieved my copy of the document. It was thick, full of dense legal language that I had paid a team of expensive lawyers to draft. At the time, Chloe had called it insulting. Now I saw it for what it was, a shield. And perhaps a sword. I spent the rest of the night reading it, a pot of coffee brewing on the side. I went through it clause by clause, highlighting anything that seemed relevant. I read about the division of assets, the protection of my company, the terms of spousal support. And then I found it. Tucked away in a section titled Marital Debts and Financial Misconduct was a clause I had barely remembered asking my lawyer to include. It was Clause 17B. It stated, with perfect legal clarity, that any debt incurred by one party for non-essential, personal expenses, without the explicit, prior written consent of the other party, would be considered the sole and separate debt of the party who incurred it. It specifically listed cosmetic surgery as an example of a non-essential personal expense. My breath hitched. This was it. This was the leverage Linda had been talking about. The $30,000 was not a marital debt. It was Chloe's debt. But there was more. The next clause, 17C, dealt with fraudulent activity. It stated that any use of shared or family assets obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation would be considered a breach of the agreement. In the event of such a breach, the aggrieved party would have the right to seek full restitution, and it could be used as a factor in determining spousal support arrangements in the event of a divorce. I read the two clauses over and over again. The forgery of the doctor's letter was a clear case of fraudulent misrepresentation. The mommy makeover was a non-essential personal expense. She had triggered both clauses. She had handed me the weapon with which to hold her accountable. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise. I wasn't just going to get the money back. That was too simple, too easy. She wouldn't learn a thing from that. I was going to make this debt her burden, a permanent part of her legal reality within the marriage. I was going to attach this transgression to the one document she hated most, the prenuptial agreement. The first step was to contact the lawyer who had represented Chloe during the prenup negotiations. His name was Mr. Davies. He had been a bulldog, fighting for every possible concession for his client. He had been smug and condescending, clearly viewing me as an obstacle to his client's financial windfall. I had not liked him, but I knew he was legally bound to his former client and to the terms of the document he had helped create. I found his number and called his office the next morning. His secretary put me on hold. I waited, my heart a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. "Mr. Davies speaking," he said, his voice as oily as I remembered. "Mr. Davies, this is Eleanor Vance," I said. "I believe you'll remember me. I am Mark Vance's mother." There was a slight pause. "Mrs. Vance. Of course. It's been a few years. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I'm calling regarding the prenuptial agreement you negotiated on behalf of Chloe Sterling," I said. "I have a matter to bring to your attention that falls under Clause 17 of that agreement." I could almost hear him sit up straighter. Clause 17? I'd have to pull the file. "What is this concerning?" "It concerns a significant personal debt incurred by your former client through fraudulent means, using family trust assets," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion. "I have irrefutable proof, including a forged document. According to the terms of the agreement, this debt is to be assigned as her sole responsibility." Mr. Davies was silent for a long moment. I knew what he was thinking. He was rereading the clause in his mind, assessing the legal ramifications. His duty was to the agreement itself. "That is a very serious allegation, Mrs. Vance," he said finally, his tone shifting from dismissive to cautious. "It is a very serious matter," I replied. "I will be sending you a package of documents for your review. It will include the bank statement from the trust, the forged letter of medical necessity, and a copy of the invoice from the cosmetic surgery clinic. I expect you to act in accordance with the legal framework you helped establish. I want this $30,000 debt officially recorded and appended to the prenuptial agreement as Chloe's sole and separate liability. I believe the agreement provides a mechanism for such addendums." He was caught. He couldn't argue with the terms he himself had negotiated. He couldn't defend his client's fraud. His only option was to comply with the legal process. "Send me the documents," he said, his voice clipped. "I will review them. I'll have them messengered to your office this afternoon," I said. "I expect to hear from you once the addendum is filed." I hung up the phone, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. The trap was being set. The pieces were moving into place. Chloe thought she had gotten away with it. She was probably at home, admiring her new figure in the mirror, feeling clever and triumphant. She had no idea that the legal document she despised was about to become her own personal cage. Now, all that was left was the confrontation. I needed to do it in person. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the game was over. I wanted to watch the arrogance drain from Chloe's eyes. I called Mark. "I'm hosting a small family dinner on Sunday evening," I said, my tone pleasant and unwavering. "Just the three of us. I'd like to discuss some family financial planning for the new year. Please don't be late." He agreed, oblivious. He probably thought I had dropped the issue of the withdrawal, that my earlier questions were just a passing curiosity. He had no idea he was walking into the quietest, most devastating ambush of his life. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I made copies of all the documents: the bank statement, the forged letter, the invoice from the clinic which I had managed to obtain through a private investigator Linda had recommended, and the highlighted sections of the prenup. I placed each set in a neat folder. When Sunday arrived, I was surprisingly calm. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a core of pure, unadulterated resolve. I cooked their favorite meal, a standing rib roast, just the way Robert used to make it. I set the dining room table with my best china and silver. I wanted the setting to be one of normalcy, of family tradition. I wanted the contrast to be as sharp as possible when I finally lowered the boom. They arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. Mark gave me a hug, his grip a little too tight, a sign of his lingering guilt. Chloe offered me a cool peck on the cheek, her perfume filling the air. She was wearing a tight, emerald green dress that showed off her surgically enhanced figure. She looked stunning, and she knew it. "You look wonderful, Chloe," I said, my voice even. "Thank you, Eleanor," she said with a bright, false smile. "I've been working really hard to get my body back after the baby."
I just smiled back.
The lie was so audacious, so effortless. She truly believed she was untouchable. We made small talk through dinner. We talked about Lily, about Mark's work, about my charity foundation. Chloe dominated the conversation, talking about a recent shopping trip, a friend's new car, a planned vacation to a 5-star resort. She was performing the role of the happy, wealthy wife, a role she clearly cherished. Mark watched her with a look of adoration, a look that made my heart ache. He was so blinded by her beauty and confidence that he couldn't see the rot underneath. Finally, after the plates were cleared and I had served coffee, I decided it was time. I folded my hands on the table and looked at them both. "I'm glad we could do this," I began, my voice quiet but firm. "As I mentioned, I wanted to talk about some family finances." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Chloe, however, leaned forward slightly, a flicker of interest in her eyes. She loved talking about money when she thought it was going to be given to her. "I've been reviewing the accounts for the Legacy Trust," I said, my gaze fixed on Chloe. Her smile tightened just a fraction of an inch. "And I came across the $30,000 withdrawal for your medical procedure, Chloe." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The cozy warmth of the family dinner evaporated, replaced by a sudden, icy tension. Chloe picked up her coffee cup, her hand perfectly steady. "Yes, we talked about this," she said, directing her words to Mark as if I wasn't there. "It was a necessary expense. Mark took care of all the paperwork." "Yes, he did," I said. I reached for the folder I had placed on the sideboard earlier and slid it onto the center of the table. "He sent me this paperwork. A letter from a Dr. Peterson in Oregon. I am now in the present moment, watching them. I feel a strange detachment, as if I am observing a scene in a play. The air is thick with unspoken words. Mark's face is pale, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He won't meet my eyes. Chloe, however, looks directly at me, her expression a mask of defiance. She is daring me to challenge her. I open the folder and slide the forged letter across the polished wood of the table until it stops directly in front of her. "This letter?" I ask softly. She glances down at it, then back up at me, her chin held high.
"Yes.
That's the one. The doctor's recommendation. It's a very convincing document," I say, my voice still quiet. I can feel my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm. This is the moment. The point of no return. The only problem is, it's a complete fabrication. Chloe lets out a short, sharp laugh. It's a brittle sound. "What are you talking about?" "That's a ridiculous accusation." "Is it?" I say. I lean forward slightly. "I called Dr. Peterson's office, Chloe. I spoke with his receptionist. They have never heard of you. They have no record of you as a patient. Because you have never been his patient. You have never even been to his office. You and Mark found a real doctor's name, created a fake letterhead, and forged this document to steal money from your daughter's trust fund." The color drains from Chloe's face. The mask of defiance cracks, revealing a flash of pure panic underneath. She looks at Mark, her eyes wide with fury and fear. "Mark, are you going to let her talk to me like this?" Mark finally looks at me, his eyes pleading. "Mom, please. This is a private family matter. We can sort this out." "This stopped being a private family matter the moment you committed fraud," I state, my voice turning to ice. "You used this forgery to justify a $30,000 withdrawal. And where did that money go? Not to a medically necessary procedure. Not to correct some non-existent birth complication." I slide a second document out of the folder. It's the invoice from the Pinnacle Aesthetics Clinic. I push it across the table to Chloe. It lists in cold, black, and white every procedure she had done. A breast lift, an abdominoplasty, and liposuction on her thighs and hips. A mommy makeover. It went here. I say. It paid for this. For your vanity. You stole from your own baby to get a flatter stomach. Chloe stares at the invoice, her mouth opening and closing silently. She is cornered. The evidence is undeniable. There is no lie she can spin, no excuse she can invent that will get her out of this. She finally finds her voice, and it is laced with venom. You have no right. It's our money. Mark is the trustee. He approved it. You are just a bitter old woman who can't stand to see her son happy with someone else. That money is not yours, I say, my voice rising for the first time. It is Lily's. And Mark did not approve it. He was your accomplice in a crime against his own child. So, what are you going to do? She spits, her bravado returning. Call the police? Send your own son to jail? I don't think so. You won't do that. You have nothing. I let her words hang in the air for a moment. I let her feel that flicker of victory. Then I reach into the folder one last time. I pull out the copy of the prenuptial agreement, the pages held together by a simple paperclip. I slide it across the table. It comes to rest next to the forged letter and the surgeon's invoice. You're right, Chloe, I say calmly. I'm not going to call the police. I don't need to, because I have this. I tap my finger on the highlighted section, Clause 17b. This document, which you signed, states that any debt for a non-essential personal expense, like cosmetic surgery, is the sole responsibility of the person who incurred it. This $30,000 bill is not a marital debt. It is your debt. Yours and yours alone. She glances at the page, her eyes scanning the legal text. A flicker of confusion crosses her face. That's just paper. It doesn't mean anything. How could you possibly enforce that? Oh, I'm not going to enforce it, I say. And here is the final, killing blow. I reach into my handbag and pull out a sealed envelope from a courier service. I place it on the table. I tell her what I have done. I explain that I sent copies of all these documents, the proof of the fraudulent withdrawal, the invoice for her cosmetic surgery, to Mr. Davies, her lawyer, the man who represented her. I have instructed him, I say, my eyes locked on hers, to file an official addendum to your prenuptial agreement, an addendum that formally assigns this $30,000 debt to you and you alone. It is now a permanent, legally binding part of your marriage contract, a black mark that will follow you. It will affect your credit. It will be considered in any future financial settlements. It is your scarlet letter, Chloe, and you gave it to yourself. The transformation is stunning. The arrogance, the defiance, the anger, it all drains away, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated horror. She finally understands. This isn't about me being angry. This isn't about a family argument she can manipulate her way out of. I have used the system against her. I have used her own lawyer, her own contract, to brand her with her crime. She looks at Mark, her face a mess of tears and fury. You have to fix this, she shrieks. Tell her to call it off. Mark looks at me, his face ashen. He looks completely broken. Mom, please. Don't do this. I look at my son, and for the first time, I feel a sliver of pity. He is weak. He allowed this woman to corrupt him, to turn him into a liar and a thief. But he is still my son. This is not my doing, Mark, I say, my voice softening just a little. This is the consequence of your actions. Both of you. The debt is now legally Chloe's. And I want the money back in Lily's trust fund. You have 90 days to repay it in full. If you do not, I will explore further legal options based on the fraud. I stand up from the table. The meal is over. The family I thought I had is gone, replaced by this ugly, broken thing. I think you should both leave now, I say quietly. Chloe is sobbing now, loud, hysterical sobs. They are not tears of remorse. They are tears of rage and thwarted greed. Mark helps her up, his arm around her shaking shoulders. He gives me one last, desperate look.
I just shake my head.
I watch them leave. I listen to the front door close behind them. I stand alone in my beautiful dining room, surrounded by the remnants of a family dinner that turned into a tribunal. I do not feel triumphant. I do not feel victorious. I feel empty and very, very tired. But I also feel something else. A sense of rightness. I protected Lily's legacy. I drew a line in the sand. And I showed my daughter-in-law, once and for all, that my kindness was not weakness. The days that followed were filled with a heavy, suffocating silence.
Mark didn't call.
Chloe didn't call. I half expected a barrage of angry texts or emails, but there was nothing. It was as if they had fallen off the face of the earth. I knew they were stewing, trying to figure a way out of the corner I had backed them into. But there was no way out. The legal mechanism was already in motion. A week after the dinner, I received a call from Mr. Davies. His tone was formal, stripped of its earlier oiliness. "Mrs. Vance," he said, "I am calling to confirm that I have reviewed the documents you sent. They are compelling." And asked, my voice calm. "And I have acted in accordance with the provisions of the prenuptial agreement. An addendum has been drafted and filed, assigning a personal debt of $30,000 to my former client, Chloe Vance. A copy has been sent to her and to her husband." "Thank you, Mr. Davies," I said. "I appreciate your professionalism." "I am an officer of the court, Mrs. Vance," he replied, a hint of steel in his voice. "My duty is to the law and to the documents I helped create." The agreement was clear. Her actions constituted a breach. The consequences are as stipulated. I hung up the phone. It was done. The legal part was sealed. Now came the personal fallout. A few days later, my sister, Carol, called me. Carol is a gentle soul who avoids conflict at all costs. She has always had a soft spot for Chloe, charmed by her outward sweetness. "Eleanor, I just got off the phone with Mark," she said, her voice worried. "He sounds terrible. He told me what happened. He said you've accused Chloe of stealing and you're trying to ruin their marriage with some legal papers." I sighed. Of course Mark had run to his aunt. He was looking for an ally, someone to help him paint me as the villain. "Carol, he didn't tell you the whole story," I said patiently. "He told you the version that makes him and Chloe look like victims." I then walked her through everything, step by step. I told her about the bank statement, the lies about the medical procedure, the forged doctor's letter. I explained what Chloe had really spent the money on. I told her about the clause in the prenup. I left nothing out. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, Eleanor," she finally said, her voice faint. "I had no idea. A forged letter? From her own baby's trust fund? That's monstrous." "Yes, it is," I said. "So, when Mark calls you again asking for sympathy, I hope you'll remember that. This isn't about me being cruel. This is about them facing the consequences of their own dishonesty." "You're right," she said, her voice stronger now. "Of course you're right. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I'm so sorry you've had to deal with this alone." Her validation was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. It reminded me that I was not crazy, that I was not the overbearing monster Chloe was undoubtedly painting me as. I was a mother and a grandmother, protecting my family's future. The 90-day deadline I had set for the repayment of the money was ticking down. For weeks, there was no word. I began to wonder if Chloe was going to call my bluff, if she would dare me to take the next step. I discussed it with Linda. "She's testing you," Linda said over lunch. "She's waiting to see if you'll actually follow through with a lawsuit. She's betting that you won't want to air the family's dirty laundry in public." She might be right about that, I admitted. The thought of it makes me sick. But I can't let her win. I can't let her think she got away with it. "Then you have to be prepared to do it," Linda said firmly. "Sometimes, the only way to deal with a bully is to punch back hard. You've set the terms. If she doesn't meet them, you have to escalate. Otherwise, all of this was for nothing." I knew she was right. I spent the next week consulting with my own lawyer, having him draft a formal legal complaint based on the fraud. It was my ace in the hole, ready to be played if Chloe failed to comply. The thought of filing it was painful, but it was a necessary preparation. With about 2 weeks left before the deadline, Mark finally called me. He sounded like a different person. The confidence was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet. "Can we talk?" "I'm listening, Mark," I said, my tone neutral. "We're going to pay the money back," he said. "We'll have it in the trust account before the deadline." I didn't say anything. I just waited. Chloe had to sell some things," he continued, his voice cracking a little. "Her grandmother's jewelry. Some of her designer bags she loved. She's not happy." "I imagine she isn't," I said coolly. "Being held accountable for one's actions is rarely a pleasant experience." "Mom, I know we messed up," he said, and for the first time, I heard genuine remorse in his voice. "I know what we did was wrong. I let her talk me into it. She was so unhappy with how she looked, and she convinced me it was the only way. I was weak. I lied to you, and I betrayed your trust. And I betrayed Lily. I have to live with that." He started to cry, quiet, broken sobs. It was the sound I had been dreading and hoping for. The sound of my son finally understanding the gravity of what he had done. "The lying was the worst part, Mark," I said gently. "The lying broke my heart." "I know," he whispered.
I'm so sorry, Mom.
"I don't know if you can ever forgive me." "Forgiveness is a long road, Mark," I said. "Repaying the money is the first step. The next step is for you to do some serious thinking about your marriage and your values. You need to decide if you are going to be a man your daughter can be proud of, or if you're going to be Chloe's puppet. You can't be both." We talked for a long time. He didn't make excuses for Chloe, not anymore. He talked about the pressure he felt to keep her happy, her constant desire for more, her belief that she was entitled to our family's wealth. It was a dam of resentment and guilt breaking open. A few days before the deadline, I received an alert from the bank. A wire transfer for $30,000 had been deposited into the Legacy Trust account. They had done it. They had met my terms. I felt a wave of relief, but it wasn't joy. There was no joy to be found in this situation. It was just the grim satisfaction of a necessary, painful task completed. A few months passed. The holidays were approaching, and with them, the inevitable family gatherings. I was dreading seeing Chloe. I knew it would be awkward and tense. I hosted our family's annual Christmas Eve dinner, as I always did. My sister Carol came, along with her children. Mark and Chloe were the last to arrive. When I opened the door, the change in them was palpable. Mark looked older, more serious. He met my gaze directly and gave me a respectful, quiet hug. Chloe stood behind him, holding Lily. She was dressed simply, in a dark dress I didn't recognize. The flashy jewelry was gone. The designer handbag was gone. She looked diminished. She wouldn't look at me. She mumbled a "hello, Eleanor," and quickly moved past me into the house. Throughout the evening, she was a ghost. She was quiet, withdrawn. She stayed by Mark's side, rarely speaking unless spoken to. The bubbly, confident woman who had dominated every room she entered was gone. In her place was this subdued, watchful person. When she looked at me, which was rare, her eyes were filled with a cold, simmering resentment. She had not forgiven me. I did not expect her to. Later in the evening, I was in the kitchen getting dessert when Mark came in. "The house looks beautiful, Mom," he said. "Thank you, dear," I said, handing him a stack of plates. We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "Things have been difficult. With Chloe."
She's angry all the time. She blames me.
"She blames you. And who do you blame, Mark?" I asked, looking him in the eye. He looked down at the plates in his hands. "I blame myself," he said quietly. "I should have been stronger. I should have said no. I'm working on it. We're in counseling." I nodded slowly. "That's a good step." "I don't know if we're going to make it," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The prenup, that addendum, it's always there. She feels like she's on probation. She says I let you put a leash on her." "She put the leash on herself, Mark," I said firmly. "She forged a document and stole from her child. That leash is called accountability." He nodded, a sad acceptance in his eyes. I know. I just, I hope one day we can be a family again. We are a family, Mark, I said. It's just a different kind of family now. One with clearer boundaries. I saw them again at Lily's first birthday party. It was a small affair, just close family. Chloe had planned it, but it was a far cry from the lavish events she used to orchestrate. It was simple, tasteful, and focused entirely on the baby. Chloe was polite to me, but distant. The chill was still there. I watched her with her daughter, and I saw a genuine love there, a tenderness that was real. But I also saw a woman who was trapped. Trapped by her own choices, and by the legal document that now served as a permanent reminder of her greatest mistake. I never removed the addendum from the prenup. It remains there, a silent guardian of my family's legacy. It is a reminder to Chloe and to Mark that there are lines that cannot be crossed. My relationship with my son is slowly healing. It is a long process, built on his consistent efforts to prove he has changed. He is more involved in the family business, more responsible, less under his wife's spell. He is becoming the man Robert and I raised him to be. As for Chloe, I don't know if she will ever change. Her resentment towards me is a wall between us, perhaps one that will never come down. But she is careful now. She is respectful. She understands that I am not just a source of endless funds, but the matriarch of this family, and I will protect it and its future at all costs. I stopped being the endlessly kind, accommodating mother-in-law. I became something else, a gatekeeper. And in doing so, I saved my son, and I saved my granddaughter's future from the person who should have been its most fierce protector. I did not win a victory, but I prevented a total loss. And sometimes that is enough. The quiet satisfaction of that is my own private dividend.